All right, so this third and final panel is about facing the cost of living crisis. And if you're as bored as I am about hearing about the cost of living crisis and all of its things, then I promise you this is going to be a little bit different, because we're going to talk about some of the things that are happening, but talk about some of the things that are good and that we can do and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm going to allow our panel to introduce themselves. And start with David. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. And if you could just answer in any way you like a question as we go of, are we seeing the worst of this yet?
Okay. David, apparently, but that's fine. It's fine. It's only been three and a half years. No, it's fine. So I'm Chief Executive of Hoot Credit Union Bolton, which, if you're wondering where it is kind of 20 minutes on the train that way. So do pop in and come and have a visit. So yes, I think the interesting thing about the cost of living crisis is, for a lot of my members, this isn't a new thing. And a lot of your members as well have been living in a cost of living crisis probably for the last 20 odd years, which, you could argue that's one of the main reasons why we're all together in the same room. I think this is interesting because all of a sudden it started affecting people who might vote Tory, perhaps, possibly. And that's creating a pressure on people a new pressure on people to respond, because it's not those people over there anymore, it's me. Not that I vote Tory, obviously, sorry. I should have said, oops, never mind. And so, no, I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. All of the indicators are that the next 6 months, year, 18 months, 2 years, all of the things that we've got used to being kind of all right or bearable are going to become more unbearable. And I think that's going to have an impact on people. The majority of my members are using prepayment meters for gas and electricity, and they haven't turned the heating on yet. But come the winter, they'll turn the heating on, they'll have to start feeding those meters, and that's when the real thing, I think that's where the real thing's going to bite for them.
Right, slightly out of order. Liz, can I ask you that same question? So who are you, what do you do, and also where do you come from, and are we seeing the worst of it yet?
Hi, my name is Liz Campbell. I have spoken from the floor, as you probably heard. I work for Castlemoat Credit Union, which is a credit union in the south side of Glasgow. And I've been involved in this movement sector, whatever you want to call it, for 47 years. And as David alluded there to, is the worst yet to come. And I've heard lots of speakers today that I think are very new to the movement. And we've always dealt with what people refer to as the underbanked, so the underserved. But an absolutely unsustainable model is to only serve that group of memberships. We also serve anybody that wants to participate in something that's ethical and philosophical. And we probably are going to be driven down more in terms of the economy. But like David said as well, a lot of our membership have always had a tight squeeze on their budget. They've always had limited disposable income. But it's up to us now to go back to our core objectives, and that is to do whatever, again, it's been said here several times today about training and education, and that's key to what we do, but we need to find the right and the best ways to do that in order to find mechanisms for people. In fact, we should actually attempt to do ourselves out of business, and I spoke earlier when the gentleman from TransUnion was talking about savings. Now, we're in a position where our members some of them have got loads of money saved up, and they should never need to borrow from us. But there's a new wave of members that have came on board, and this is where the automation isn't always the best thing, because you don't get that chance to brainwash them into what the ideals and the magic is in a credit union about saving and borrowing. So we need to find tools, and I know there are some tools that people have not told me yet about, where we can take control and help people to save and only allow them access. I've just realised I'm doing something that happens on the TV quite a lot. Yeah, I didn't realise that. To provide better savings and access only those savings, and then keep the rainy day money whilst they're still borrowing at the same time. But we can do it. but we just need the tools, and I think that's where the technology comes in.
Mark, same question. Introduce yourself, where you're from, and also, have we seen the worst yet?
Yeah. Hey everyone, Mark Wilkins. You met my colleague actually, Rachel, earlier, who talked through some of the stuff that we're working on at Experian with Incuto. But I look after the product strategy for the marketplaces area of Experian. So that's how we work with price comparison sites and lenders in consumer space primarily. Been there sort of 4 years or so I don't have like a ton of like other recessions or downturns to go through. Prior to that though, I was in the energy space, so if you want to talk energy pricing, I can do that. Are we through the worst? I think for consumers, no, there is definitely the winter to get through, and what that means, I think, with the prices of energy and stuff is going to be pressing and put a squeeze on people's budgets. I think what is interesting, I would say, though, is I think the uncertainty is declining. Like, I think people, certainly what we see from lenders and others, they're starting to get a bit of a sense of what the world looks a little bit like, though, and not in the mad panic like there were a few months ago and everyone's scrambling around, which I can talk about later. But it seems that at least is settling, and there's a bit more of a predictable path to what's going to happen.
Okay. I think to follow on Matthew's point, we've now had a prime minister for, well, it's actually still the shortest serving prime minister ever, but that's because he's still in office. Right? It's a bit of an unfair comparison. So just following on that, Mark, then, what's happening outside of the sector? Because I think to take Liz's point that some of the people speaking today have had a perspective of what's going on outside this. Is there a sense that what can we learn about this? Are borrowers still being served by mainstream lenders outside of this room? What's going on?
Yeah, I guess to give the context, so we work across, like I say, all the main price comparison sites pretty much with most of the lenders. And a couple of months ago, probably post the mini budget, or whatever you want to call that, it was a little bit chaotic, I would say, for us and our lenders. Products being pulled, repriced, credit decisioning scorecards being changed. Like, everyone who could do something was doing something. So our teams were just like pretty stressed out. And all the aggregators also were trying to understand, what does that mean for their future business plans? Do they need to throw them away, or do they, like, what does that mean for everything? So it was very much all up in the air. And that has calmed down, like I said, a little bit. The big trends because for the first few weeks, there's no big trends. It was just everything's moving, so it's hard to tell the story. I think now, looking back, we can see that the story was, yeah, everyone panicked, but then the story is about 30% of the loan products that were in market sort of, I don't know, August, September time have gone. So 30% of loan products are now not in the market anymore. So there's a lot less product out there. And the products that are less available are those where, I guess if you think about consumers as prime, sort of subprime, and then consumers who probably would struggle to get any credit. That subprime space is where the products have gone from. So prime customers pretty much can still get the products they've always been able to get, really. Might be slightly higher interest rates, but largely they still exist. In that middle tier, that subprime space is where that tightening and that squeezing both of credit policies and the sheer availability and breadth of products has happened. And that's largely been from like the fintech lenders. So again, the tier one lenders like Barclays or HSBC, or who've got deposits in the back and they can lend from those, largely getting on with that. Fintech lenders who borrowed money to lend are the ones who have definitely constrained or even exited completely from the market for the moment. And if they're starting to come back into the market, we're starting to see a little bit of that. They're much tighter credit policies and higher interest rate products. So essentially, you've got this pool of consumers who they would have served previously with the fintech lenders, who are now underserved. So that pot of underserved customers that we've always said was, depending on the different price comparison sites, but around 20 to 30% of the market. That's probably creeping up towards the 40% in some spaces, and the bit that's growing as I guess the top end of that piece. So the people who previously would have been served by the fintech lenders are now underserved because the products they would have had are not there in market anymore.
Okay, that's a really big piece of the argument, isn't it? If the demand's going up and it's not people in distress at the bottom who are coming in to look, it's people at the top who in August would have got a loan and they're now not going to get one, despite the fact that they think that that's one of the options.
Yeah, we talk about these guys called marginal declines, right? And so they were on the cusp, right, of being accepted or not. And in a few months ago, they probably would have been accepted, but now they're not being accepted by those lenders. So it creates that space, I think, for potentially for credit unions to play in that.
Okay, and so that neatly segues in then. So I guess, what are the opportunities that presents? David, maybe I ask you this first. What are you? How ready are you to kind of take on this next wave of people?
I think it's really exciting in a slightly terrifying way. I think another piece to bring to this argument is that when there's been previous credit squeezes in the past, there have been other types of lending that have been there. So the whole peer-to-peer model was still around the last time there was a lending squeeze. You had payday lenders who are still around, and through the good purposes of the regulators, they're no longer kind of skewing that market. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for credit unions to seize the day really and to run with it. The difficulty is, and I blame Amazon for this, is that people are used to getting everything immediately. I can order something on Amazon and have it delivered the same day, and that's just mad. I don't need it delivered the same day, but because I've got used to getting it the same day, if I now have to wait 2 days for something, I get really annoyed by it. I don't, but I'm just saying that for dramatic effect. So I think there is kind of space there for credit unions to move into this space, but we need to make sure that people know about us. Credit unions have always been this country's best kept secret, I think, and we need to have the technology there to give that kind of Amazon level of service to people, because otherwise they'll go. They'll look at. It was only 2 years ago that we were still asking people to fill in paper forms, and they'll look at a paper form and they'll go, "Whoa,"
I don't want to make anybody nervous, but I've just realised there's a chair behind me, so I'm settling in. This could be for some time. So, Liz, same question.
Instant gratification, is that what we're talking about here? That's the demands we have now from our members. Clearly an opportunity that Mark has just described there by getting onto the platform with the affordable loans. Sounds great, and in theory, I'm sure it's working in practice. I think that, and certainly from a community credit union perspective, having technology, which we've now embraced since February of this year, having joined in Kuto, and it's been an excellent journey so far. And we're learning now the differences between doing that. Oh, there's an application form. And what we need to do is embrace all of those changes, but make the best of what we're gaining from it in terms of resources and time. And something I heard through Zinc and through CU apps about personalisation. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to start looking at the individual members and personalising what we can do for them from an education, training and an advice point of view, or rather a guidance point of view, which is what David referred to me using rather than advice. And I think that's an opportunity for us to enhance our existing members' knowledge about them themselves and about developing the products that will suit their needs entirely. And that's everybody, not just people that are in this, would have been otherwise serviced in the subprime market, but everybody. But personalisation, I think, is what the go forward is for our membership, and we can do that using technology.
Okay, and Mark, I guess it's a slightly subtle question on this one, because in terms of what you're delivering or what you're seeing, how ready do you feel everybody is to take this? Is this kind of business as usual and faster, or is this a new set of if new lenders, let me ask a different question. If new lenders are coming in, like an actual question, if new lenders are coming to the market, credit unions, and they're staring down the barrel of this thing that is, for example, putting themselves out into the world in a different way in price comparison sites, for instance, do you see a difference in the readiness between a fintech lender versus a credit union? The things that we can learn from their journey that they've gone through already?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge. I think for credit unions to enter into the price comparison world and be successful in it. I think it's easy. We can help you get in that space, but actually you want to be successful in that space, right? And that's the challenge. A couple of things I think that need. I think a trust in the data and how to use, and a real understanding of how to use that data that you get is needed. You don't have the person in front of you with the information, so you've got to trust the data that you're getting, and that's a good representation, and you can make decisions off the back of that. I think a consistency in decision making. I know when we've been working with some of our panel members, it's been quite, you can only sort of code and automate processes that are consistent, and therefore if there's some inconsistencies in those processes and stuff, that can make it difficult to work in that space. This challenge for us as well, and price comparison sites, that actually your credit unions are experts on, though. So loads of the lenders in market and price comparisons make decisions all based on credit scores, whereas you've been using affordability for a long time. And so the challenge is how to bring more affordability into those markets as well is the big space that we're trying to solve as well. So, and I think when that happens, credit unions are possibly in front of some of the other lenders knowing how to use that data. So they're not used to having all this transactional data, and so lenders are trying to work out, mainstream lenders, what to do with it and how to use it and apply it to their credit policies. Whereas, yeah, some credit union, you guys probably got some of that good knowledge about how to use that. It's just about making that available through the process. So I think trusting the data, having good automated sort of repeatable systems, I think are the secret to being able to be successful. And then I guess there's a flexibility. It's a dynamic market. So lenders in price comparisons like world are continually changing products and scorecards and looking at what's going on and stuff. And so having that flexibility to think about your products in that real dynamic way, I think is a challenge to face into as well.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to ask a question to David and Liz from Credit Union World and your perspective. Is it fair that you guys have to be the kind of the person there to pick up all the people they don't want?
You want the short answer or the torturous analogy answer?
Torturous analogies are my thing.
Okay, so I promised I wasn't going to talk about the Titanic, but I'm going to now, so there you go. So I've been using this analogy of the Titanic sinking and the people falling off the Titanic, and the Titanic only sinking faster the quicker it goes down. And then there's us plucky little credit unions in our lifeboats heading out towards the disaster. And I think there's an expectation from the world that we're going to pick everybody up that we can, and we're going to look after them and find them a home and, you know, make it all soft and fluffy for them. Whereas the realization for us is that if we do that, then we're going to go under and we're not going to be able to serve anyone. So no is the quicker answer to that. I think there's also, I was on a Money Guiders conference last week, and somebody used the analogy of sticking plasters and treatments and cures, and that didn't really work. So I've kind of got another torturous COVID analogy of, you know, the first response to COVID was to lock everything down and to give everybody lots of things, give everybody lots of money, give everybody lots of face coverings, but we didn't. But, you know, it was about what can we do to treat the immediacy of it now. And I think when you look at my partners, that's what they're dealing with. They're looking at what can we do now to keep people warm. Whereas the way that the COVID kind of pandemic panned out was that there became treatments to stop. So if people got ill, they recovered from it. And then the vaccination came to stop people getting ill at all. And I think that's where our role is. It's not necessary to be that sticking plaster, that lifeboat, although we will try and pick up as many people as we can. Oh, now I'm mixing my torturous analogies. Oh, it's all gone horribly, horribly wrong. But we ought to be thinking about treatment and vaccination against future shocks rather than necessarily trying to run around picking everybody up from this one.
The funny thing is, while you were speaking there, I was thinking that that's the reason why the lifeboats are always on the ship and not called from the shore, right? If you're not there in the sea, there's no point calling a lifeboat at the point where the boat's sinking. And if we're only just setting off from the shore, then there's a lot of people going to miss on the way, right? Okay, that's the end of that analogy. Okay. Let's not do this anymore. So, Liz, same question. Is it fair?
I think to use David's analogy of the Titanic.
I was hoping that would happen.
It's crystal clear that we can't save everyone. So not everybody's going to go on the lifeboat, and we know how many times that's happened in the years where there have been sea disasters, unfortunately. But that's not what we're there for. We're there to deal with the members who have got some capacity. And if they haven't, it's back to that personalisation again that we were talking about, and other people have talked about it. And we need to find good resource for doing that. And I spoke to some of my peers in the room, Claire in particular, from Scottish Police, where we were talking about signposting, because and Mark was talking about good data and trust in that data. We're now in an environment where we are given more information about our members than we've ever had. And first sight of that, other than using algorithms or using blending decisioning tools, if we're using that information and we're making an adjudication on it, which the credit referencing companies do, we need to be very sensitive with that data. And that's a new space for some of us, especially in community credit unions. So we need to be very mindful of what we know and what our members are sharing with us and how we deal with that in terms of best serving that person. But I think now for us to go forward is everything is back to being on an individual basis, and we will serve who we can when we can. But some people, giving them money might be the absolute wrong thing to do for them. So then we need to find other mechanisms and signposting them to where they can get that support and help.
Thank you. It was really interesting to listen to that, because you made a point about we have to be really careful about the data that we've now got, and listening to the power of what you can do with open banking data, and feels like we've gone through a process of throwing lots of data at credit unions and kind of going, something's going to stick, right? What do we think is interesting? You're seeing a lot of that data, not for the first time, because you've got you've always had somebody's bank statement, but you're starting to see that data coming through in a more automated way with more detail attached to it. Like, I know what it was that they were spending in a more categorized way. Is there a danger? Do you see that as being, I mean, it's obviously a positive thing that you can get it, but do you think there's kind of an uptick that you've got to go through as a credit union to kind of go, well, how do I behave now that I know that?
Well, I think being respectful is the first thing anyway. But Jam talked about this swivel chair. And so now we're seeing things very colourful in dashboards, and we've got to read and understand that now. Sorry, what did you say about the dangerous part?
Well, when we were talking, we were talking offline before, and you mentioned about, it was actually a very specific example about, I can see that somebody's got a Sky bill, or whatever, and you almost have to set aside the judgment about what's being spent for how much is available to spend, right?
Absolutely. But it has to be, everything we do has to be based on capacity and ability, without a doubt. And I spoke to some other people in the room about that, about as a human being, assessing and adjudicating. Don't pass judgment. You can't do that. You have to choose how you handle that data properly and serve that member accurately as well. The worst thing we see so I remember just lending on trust. I don't know if anybody in the room has ever done that, but that's how we used to lend when we started, and that's what you signed on a promissory note, and it was based on trust and the member's savings, past, present and future, and that was enough to get a loan. And eventually we moved on to paperwork, and that was a nightmare. But we did it, and then we needed to sit in the swivel chair and go through spreadsheets and add it all up and then put that somewhere else. And that's great if you like doing spreadsheets, and it's a real shame that Jamoff came along and taken all that away and created a robot to do it for you. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the room might think that as well. So now you're seeing things. The worst thing we're seeing, because it's very evident and visible, is the amount of gambling that happens in people's accounts. However, there are also people who can afford to gamble. So it's about being really sensitive with the information that we're given, and we can't judge. We have to base things on capacity and affordability.
Two things. Number one, the robot never gets sad. We've tried. So you can keep doing every now and again, dip in and do it manually. It never gets bored. Just maybe to all three of you, a bit off-piste, because we were talking about that. There's kind of a bridge between I now know you're doing something that I can't lend to you because you're doing it. How does that overlay? Because you've had this data for more time. You've got way more data than anyone because you've got access to lots of stuff. How does that impact our ability to kind of fulfill that need for financial education? Can we still have those meaningful conversations with people, knowing that we've got to be conscious of the fact that we can't judge somebody, but you might want to just point them in the direction of going, but if you didn't do that one, then maybe this would be better. How do we bridge that one?
Can I answer that? Because we've been talking about this today as well, we talk about schools, going into schools and getting a head teacher to sign up for it in the first place and getting the time to deliver. So you teach people from the beginning, don't you? You have to educate them when they're young. But we're dealing with people they're in a cycle of generations where they've not had that education. So how do we break that cycle? What do we do with that? And we're facing that, and we're also facing with technology, which I love and wholly embrace, but we're also dealing with people who want instant gratification. And it's now, and we're like, you cannot afford that. You know, and trying to get them to, what you want to do with them is go back to the old-fashioned ways and get them in a room and sit down with them and wear your size 10 jackboots that we were talking about and say, listen, no, see if you do this. My mammy said, or my granny said, this is what you need to do in order to have a good, stable financial future. We'll show you how to do it. You need to let us do it for you for a little while, and then you do it for yourself.
And is that the same? I will come to you, Mark, on this one, but is that the same with you in terms of how you interact with members? Do you offer them a level of education along with the...
I think it's interesting that I'm sure that, you know, people back in Bolton would maybe disagree that, you know, if you kind of think 3, 4, 5 years ago, if we declined somebody for a loan, they probably expected to be declined for a loan, and it was just another thing they go through in their day. And I think what we're finding now is when we're declining people for loans, it's just harder because the stories behind the applications are just getting more, you know, dramatic. I was going to say torturous. Torturous is the word, but dramatic's the word, you know. And there's so much. It feels like there's so much more involved when people applying for loans now than it possibly was before. That's just me. You know, it's very rare that they let me loose on the loan decision. So, you know, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that's the truth for anyone. So I think that one of the challenges is around what do you do. So if we turn somebody down for a loan, we tell them why we've turned them down for a loan, and we provide them with information about this is why we did it. This is something you can do to solve it yourself, or you know, as best we can. And if you want help, this is where you go. So we've been doing that for a number of years, and that kind of, I don't know if it works or not. We used to send them physical. Leaflets out when we turn people down, and now it's all done cleverly within Quto, sending out emails with attachments and stuff like that. I think it'd be interesting.
It's called a decline reason.
It'll be interesting to see how many times those links are followed to that information. And we've put a lot of information on our website about where to go for help, and you know, and it's kind of always been there, but we've just tried to bring it more to the front so people can kind of see it really.
Careful with those suggestions, by the way. Somebody at the back of the room will have got the notepad out and started writing down we've got a new requirement.
Okay.
So Mark, on that financial education piece, is that something that, with that new data that's coming in, do you find it more of a struggle to kind of structure that?
I guess a couple of things. Just to pick up on your final point, I guess one of the big drivers for experience, certainly my team, that eligibility is to avoid people having to have those like hard searches and hard declines. So, and we know that in the market that's hard searches have gone down dramatically and soft searches have gone up hugely and stuff. And that transition is definitely something we've helped power and quite proud of. But that still means there will still be some people who face that decline point though. And we're not speaking to people, so we're a data company, so we're not sort of having those day-to-day interactions, certainly not my area of experience. But what we can do is try and provide tools to at least give them some clarity or some visibility as to why they might be being declined or what's behind that decision. And so that's why we provide credit scores, the tricky bit is trying to make it really clear. So you could provide somebody with their credit report, but as you guys know, it's a pretty complicated thing, a credit report, and so putting that in front of somebody is probably not going to be that helpful. So then we try and layer some insights on top of that. We have things called factors and components that are all sort of products that are available to bank and you guys if you want them, and they try and explain why and what's driving your score to be a certain thing and why you might be accepted or why you might be having declines given against you and some steps to take. But there is a limit to how useful those are, because nothing is quite as powerful as sitting opposite somebody and giving them that face-to-face advice. But there are tools that we try and do. The other piece that I guess we've struggled, both we have and lenders and aggregators have, is the sheer amount of open banking data there is. Like, how do you turn that into like a really nice structured way? I mean, we work, probably the one that's most obvious out in the market is, we're powering a solution with ClearScore and LenderView and stuff, and that's sort of doing that, trying to give you a view of what your data is saying about you. But there's a lot of data to try and summarize and package up and say and how that works. And it's not, the tricky bit as well, it's not consistently used by lenders. So lenders look at the same bit of information and make different calls and judgments based on that. So for some, they might have a hard decline, like no gambling whatsoever, and then others might have much softer rules around that. So yeah, there are big challenges when you're trying to cross-market, try and tell the story of what your data is saying about you. So yeah, that is definitely a challenge that we're trying to face into and answer. If anybody's got any, advice on how to do that better, then please, we're up for it. But we are, we've got a whole team of people working through that and stuff. And if you want to come and talk, happy to engage about what tools we do have available.
Cool. Okay. So I promised we wouldn't be downbeat about this, and we've been quite fast-paced about all that stuff. We talked about the opportunity. So let's end it on a positive note. What are the kind of silver linings we're taking from all this? We're in a cost of living crisis that everybody keeps talking about, but we've got opportunities. So what are we going to do? What's the good thing that's going to come out of it?
Very good. Go for it. Should we start with Liz?
Yeah, I'm going to need some time to think on that one. I think.
Let's start with Liz.
Liz, give us a shot.
Where my excitement comes from and where I see opportunity is after what I've experienced in this room today and some of the presentations as well. And it's about us using all of these resources that are available to us to get the best outcomes for our members and our member services. We launched our member area on International Credit Union Day on the 20th of October. And we've now got 800 people have signed up for that, and they love it. And what they loved was their share to loan ratio, the little pie chart. So that's because we've got members with fabulous savings, and we've got new ones that have just came on board with this automation that don't even know what that means to save. It's like, you get a loan when you've put some money away, for goodness sake, give us a break, give us a wee while, but obviously we moved on from that. So from what's happened in this room today and from where Incuto are going and what their drive is, and we're going along that journey with them, but I think it's the partnering and the collaboration and the working with all the other services that are available is where I see our opportunity, and we have to embrace it. We've got to move on with it.
Thank you. That was exactly what David was going to say. So now he's going to have to think of something else.
No, I've got something now.
Oh, you got something? Right.
I'll wait.
Oh, David's going to wait.
We rehearsed this as
Mark,
well, so
give us something close.
Yeah, well, very cliche, but I would say these things will pass, right? This is a time, and there will be, a time when life is better again on the other side, and that doesn't help people in the immediate, but I think sometimes we need that slightly longer perspective always. But what it does mean, I think, in this moment is there's loads of attention and creative minds and focus on this space, on how do we help people who are most vulnerable. That perhaps wasn't the case, a year or so ago. That it wasn't the top of mind challenge that it is now, and that means that comes with thinking, but also potential budgets and solutions and new products and stuff to that space. So that is something that I think is positive and can help people in this room to do that. And a couple of examples maybe to think, so all the open banking and affordability type stuff, how do we create visibility in schools around people's resilience and even provide information? It's easy for, when TransUnion or Experian tell people what its usual savings amount might be, but no one knows, right? What an average what's a good, people don't know. So they might think I've got £250 at the bank, I'm doing well, or they might think, so having those tools that bring that visibility of those things, I think, is important and actually helps people to try and understand what a good model or aspirational goal is, and so, because people don't have those very easy, because we still don't talk about finance very openly or very, very clearly to one another. And then that's one opportunity. The other areas, things like refinancing, it hardly happens, right, in some markets. Car refinancing or loan refinance, they don't really happen to the level that I think people would love them to. And there's real opportunities for people to make big savings by thinking about that. Average car loan 12% or whatever, refinancing for 5%, just for example, the opportunity exists. And so facing into those and trying to create the products and services that address those challenges, I think, that have been structured for quite a long time, but we've lived with, but actually gives us a bit of more momentum to try and solve them, I think are exciting opportunities for us.
Excellent. David?
I think credit unions are reaping the benefit of the last 8, 9, 10 years of chipping away at local authorities and housing associations and saying, look, we're here to help you do what we can. I think that does come with the danger of the expectation of the lifeboat response to that. But I think now is our time to shine, I think, because there are undoubtedly going to be people that we can help that nobody else will be able to help. I think it's going to bring a whole new range of people who have never even considered a credit union before once they find us to our doors, and that can only be a good thing. Certainly over the last, I've been doing lots of these things, it feels like, over the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I've written down more things that we need to change in the last 2 or 3 weeks than I think I've written down in the last 2 or 3 years. And they're all things that needed to be changed anyway, probably. So actually having that prompt to make positive changes to the way that we do things, and to maybe address some of the things that we've ignored over the past couple of years because of COVID. Look at our loan journey and find out where the sticking points are and do something to address that so that it becomes more of that Amazon-like experience.
Okay, that was a very good note to end on.
Okay, thank you.
I'm aware of the time, but I'm going to open this up to any questions, because thank you very much, guys, for all your contributions on this. Are there any questions you guys would like to ask? Go. Oh, sorry. Sorry, that was me.
That's all right. We spoke about this whole window of opportunity that's existing for credit unions at the moment. This is probably more towards you, Mark, whereby the kind of high street banks, the innovative lenders have pulled back. There's this space that's opening up. What's your kind of crystal ball outlook on how long this space is open for before we go, hey, look, we're happy here, Q1's coming, actually, we think we've got our scorecards in order, our price in order, our back book looks okay, we're going to close this down as such and get back on it again?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think already, so when I talked to my opening statement, was I think some of the uncertainty has calmed down a little bit. Loads of people initially pulled out or they just didn't want to engage, and they started to especially those fintechs, have re-land on their target market or the people they want to go after, and that is a smaller subset. And while I think there's still energy challenges and affordability challenges, then I think that will remain. So I don't think it's going to disappear overnight, and that they're going to suddenly open up their doors again and lend to everybody. I think it will probably tail off as they get more confident about making those decisions, who to lend to and who not to. But yeah, while there's still a cost of living, I don't see why they would change those lending policies particularly. So at least a year or so, I would suggest that'll be right.
And I think that's where our opportunity comes, because everybody knows that once you're a member of a credit union, unless you don't pay back your own, you're always a member of a credit union. And once we start having those conversations, once we start offering those treatment and vaccination type interactions with people, that people will choose to stay with the credit union, because actually, why wouldn't you? Credit unions are wonderful, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Fist bump.
Anybody else want to ask a question where David can mention vaccinations?
Yeah, Rupert at the back
Or
of
the
the room.
Titanic.
Or the Titanic, yeah.
Rupert at the back of the room.
Rupert.
So I kind of got two questions, one of which is related to data and technology and the education piece and life effects is gamification. I mean, and actually I just wondered, having listened here as someone who really doesn't understand this industry at all, so I'm sort of completely ingénué when it comes to credit unions. Actually, education is a really important part. We heard it coming through the schools and people they do. But if there is now this wealth of data that's becoming available, as Mark said with Experian, gamification is a very quick way, particularly if people are spending money on games, in-game betting, things like that, as a way of educating. And that leads into the second one, which is if people go through some form of post-rejection gamification education, is there a way back in the sort of credit rescoring? That's question one. I'll let you answer that before I answer question two, if that's okay.
Yeah, so it's a good question. Certainly there is a way back. So people's credit scores recover. It takes time, generally, but they do recover. And I think most credit reference agencies are looking at sort of trended data as well to try and predict who's going to recover and who isn't as well, and how quickly that will take as well, because that in itself is an interesting market to look at. But yeah, it takes time to rebuild your credit score from if you've had some CCJ or something has happened in their missed payments and stuff. In terms of gamification, yes, I mean, I don't know if you've read books like Hooked and those sort of things where you try and create those ongoing engagement and reward metrics and stuff so that people come back into your app or your experience, and then they're getting a little bit of a reward for doing an action, and they can see how that's tracking. And that's the challenge with credit scores, because it changes slowly. It is actually trying to show how people are making progress over time. And I don't know about you, but I'm subscribed to pretty much every price comparison site just by the nature of my job, right? So I get emails on a daily basis from all of them, and they're all telling me how my credit score has changed this day, or new products available to me and stuff. And so I think it can be used that way as a metric, but open banking could help with that too.
That's a traditional model which you just described, where it takes time to recover. If it was being described by Liz and David, the issue is very often people don't know, so they accidentally they deprioritise something, which actually is very important in the credit score to get there. So if they go through an educational process and they're then aware, is there a way of shortening the journey back? That's what I'm really asking, because self-awareness is one thing.
Yeah.
Following through on it, and therefore micro things they can do could be cancelling Sky, could be certain things, or whatever it happens to be, and I'm not judging Sky. I'm just saying that the traditional model doesn't allow for a rapid recovery, but awareness, hallelujah, I've seen the light, can be instantaneous. So it's that sort of gamification, proving it in some way, feeding back in faster recovery, I guess, is what I'm allowing them to do.
Yeah, and definitely that's the goal. And so this sits slightly outside of my data. Is Experian does have two things. We've got all the online tools you can look at, and you can see what's happening and stuff. But we do have like an offline, contact center as well, where you can call up and speak to an advisor, and they will help you provide some of that next steps. What's going to make the biggest impact on your score in the quickest time and stuff? They'll definitely do that, and that does impact a little bit on some of the on digital things we do as well. But the other thing, like I say, is come back to the point around the trended data as well, which I think is quite a hot topic in CRA space, is about how we can identify who's on that recovery journey and when they're going to get there, and who isn't. And because those guys who are on that journey, there might be people you might want to lend to a little bit earlier than what you normally would have done and stuff. Yeah, and so that is, I think, a big area that's being explored. And like I say, I think we're doing it. I'm pretty sure TransUnion and everybody else is looking at a similar space as well. So.
And I love a bell or a whistle, so if you can build something and it's going to help my members and not break my credit union, I'm up for that.
And then the second question, just LifeBet, is the charity sector. So I'm a charity trustee. I look after some funds that are related to relief of poverty. And actually, we make some micro grants and things like that. When you can't lend because they don't qualify, they've got a negative, whatever the term is there a partnership between the charity sector with those grant-making bodies where actually you can provide short-term relief, because that's what a grant is. It obviously has to fall under conditions, but I haven't heard any. That's another social aspect, and I just wondered where this community was on that bit of it as well.
I wouldn't speak on behalf of the whole community, I wouldn't dare. But personally, in Bolton Council have got quite an aggressive approach to what they're doing, with lots of sticking plasters, and so giving a grant to somebody is obviously that short-term sticking plaster. They have a grant pot that you can apply for, that I'm going to apply for, just so that if we can't give somebody something, when they're in tears down the telephone, that we're able to offer something. The danger of that, though, is that then people think, well, if you've given me money this time, then the next time I lend you money, then I don't have to pay it back because I didn't have to pay the last one back. And I know people in this room have really suffered from that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a twin-edged sword, that one.
Rupert, we have a relationship with Creative Scotland, and Creative Scotland support an organisation called Craft Scotland. And we had an arrangement with them that we would lend to craft makers, but the craft maker isn't totally aware that there's actually a loan guarantee fund. So we're recycling, same amount, £26,000, and that's supporting 4 or 5 craft makers. And that's all through the pandemic. But we've never needed to call upon that guarantee fund because those people have adopted a habit of, Chris is out the room, isn't he? I don't know if I should have said that in front of Chris. They've adopted a habit of saving and borrowing from us as well. So we treat them like a member in that sense, although we know that our risk is zero, And I think that's better than getting grants, because you're really empowering that person, and you've got that ownership as well, which is key to, I think, what we do.
Thank you. I liked your first question, Rupert. I'm slightly miserable that Mark gets offered new products from all the aggregators and I keep getting invited to unsubscribe. So, damn those soft searches in their data. Right, any other questions from the room? We good? Amazing. Right. Take the opportunity to say thank you to the panel through the usual medium of applause. If that's
Thank
all right.
you.